with me. I hope that's okay with all of you. But we have 3 lovely guests lined up to talk to you about all things whiskey and whiskey related. So you won't have to listen to me too much. So if you've never been with us before and this is your first Pour and Sip live tasting, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please do get in touch with us and comment. Please let us know your tasting notes. Please let us know if you've got any questions for our guests. Remember, there's no question that's too stupid, too silly. We'll answer everything, you know, and there's no tasting note which is wrong. Please just let us know what you think about these whiskies and we will read those comments out. The order of proceedings tonight, we are going to be starting off in Japan. We're doing a bit of globetrotting tonight, I have to say. We're going to be starting off in Japan and talking to David about all things Hakushu, the Distiller's Reserve. Then we will be going to Glenfiddich to talk about the 15-year-old, the Solera, and we'll be talking with Alex if he manages to sort out his connection issues. And then we'll be heading over to talk about all things Ardnamurchan. I've messed it up already. Sorry, Antonia. I'm absolutely sorry about that. I'm an absolute blank there. But I will be corrected at the right point in time later tonight. And then we've got 2 final drams, which I'm going to give a very, very brief whistle-stop tour over. And that's the Old Perth 12-year-old and the Bòcan. So lovely stuff tonight. Really looking forward to it. Lots of great whiskey to try. And I think it's probably time to welcome our first guest. So please get your Japanese, your Hakushu ready. And I'm going to welcome David onto the screen. How are you, David?
I'm very well, Andy. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. For any of our real Pour and Sip regulars, you know, we've had David on the show many times before. So welcome back, welcome back. For anyone who hasn't been on the show before and maybe not recognise this face, please talk to us a little bit about your journey into whiskey and how you found yourself in your role.
Well, so I work for Edrington in the UK. Edrington Edrington's the Scottish company that owns the Macallan and Highland Park, famous grouse, the Glenrothes, but also does all the sales, marketing and distribution for Beam Suntory. And Beam bourbons, small batch bourbons, but they also own a number of Scottish whiskies, Lafroig, Bowmore, Glengarry, Ardnamurchan. The Suntory part of it is the Japanese whiskies, the reason that we're here today. So I am lucky enough to do training, advocacy, basically to talk about any and every whiskey in the portfolio. So tonight it is all about the Hakushu. I joined the company originally on the sales side of things. The honest truth is, you wouldn't ever really want to employ me as a salesperson. It's not where my natural talents lie by any means, but managed to get a job on this side of the industry, just, yeah, educating, infusing, talking about the whiskies, just trying to share the love for what is such a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it should be loved and it should be shared.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're doing tonight. I think the last time talking about that amazing portfolio of Edringtons, I think we did Lafroig, didn't we? We did the last time. I think that was the sherry cask.
We did the sherry cask and possibly one of the cask strength ones.
Yeah, I think we did.
And I'm pretty sure I've done a Highland Park with you as well.
You did. Okay, so this is definitely a pretty great portfolio. But tonight we're talking about Japanese whiskey and Hakushu. So talk to us a little bit, for anyone who doesn't know about Hakushu and the distillery and its history.
So Hakushu is part of the Suntory portfolio. 2023 has been and is a very exciting year for Suntory because it's our centenary. So we are basing this on the fact that our other single malt distillery, the Yamazaki distillery, started production in 1923. So this is 100 years. Yamazaki was the first distillery in Japan. So it's not just 100 years of Suntory or of Yamazaki, it's 100 years of Japanese whiskey. The Hakushu distillery was opened in 1973. So it is actually our 50th anniversary. It's our golden anniversary this year. The goal with Hakushu was, yeah, we wanted to make more whiskey, but we wanted to create a whiskey that, or a distillery that would give us whiskey that was different to Yamazaki. There was no point, no purpose in just duplicating what we already had, but it also had to be whiskey that fits in with Suntory's whole philosophy. And I think now is the moment we should talk philosophy here, Andy. So I'm going to pour myself a dram because
lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Mine's pre-poured, already waiting.
Underlying everything that Suntory do is the idea that the whiskies that we are producing are always going to be suited to the Japanese palate. We are looking for whiskies that have delicacy to them, that have finesse to them, but do have complexity as well. But Suntory don't make huge, powerhouse whiskies. You're not going to get Suntory sherry bombs. You're not going to get a Suntory whiskey that's trying to compete with Lafroig or Octomore or anything like that. We do use peated whiskey. Hakushu knows it is a peated whiskey, but it's delicate, it's gentle. We are always going to adhere to that philosophy that Shinjiro Tori, our founder, the reason we're called Suntory, Shinjiro Tori founded the company. This underlies everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find one of the things with, with Japanese whiskey is a lot of people, when they're coming into it, what makes Japanese whiskey so special. But a lot of people expect something really a bit, it's always very subtle, Japanese whiskey, and they're always expecting something huge out of these flavors. But no, Japanese whiskey is really subtle. And it says everything about their culture. For me, the blending process, the art of blending over there, it's so meticulous. It's so wonderfully crafted, and I find that a lot of people sometimes get disappointed when they've heard so much special stuff about Japanese whiskey. They're like, oh, that's really subtle. I was expecting some huge flavor bomb kind of thing, and they don't really get that. And this is kind of a great example of that, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the point you've just made there about the Japanese culture and where this comes from, if you think about Scotch whiskey, Scotland, think about Scottish food, first thing you're probably going to be thinking of is haggis or something like that. It's great. I love a good haggis, me, but it's powerful, it's punchy, it's got big flavors to it. You think about Japanese food, what's the first thing you're probably going to think of? Sushi. Yeah. It's probably for the forefront of your mind, but no one orders sushi because they want wham bam, thank you ma'am. You order sushi because of the delicacy, the attention to detail, the striving for perfection. So we're judging by slightly different standards, if you like, but only because we're striving to achieve a slightly different goal. Sure. It's not a big flavor bomb, but give it a chance and allow the whiskey to express itself. It is still an incredibly complex whiskey. There is so much.
Well, that's the thing. Complex is absolutely the thing we've got going on here. Lots of tasting notes coming in already, and lots of people getting apricots. Malcolm Tucker, Hakushu knows peaches, apricots with custard and some wet grass. Anthony Mullins getting a beautiful jam sat on a lovely homemade scone. That's a very, very.
Shall we have an argument here? I think you meant to say scone.
Yeah, no,
Andy.
That's not very English of me, but I don't know. We could have this argument if we wanted to, but I don't really know, to be honest with you. I just think that's stone, if I'm completely honest.
I think those absolutely the stoned fruit, that's all there. The green notes, the grassiness. I always get like a little hint of sort of melon, and it's not sort of watermelon. It's like much greener than a cantaloupe.
Sure.
So that sort of beautiful, soft French, not French fruit, fresh fruit that's coming through here.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff. There's like you said, there's that green note, a little bit of wet grass or cut grass. I think somebody called it as well. Maybe a little bit of peppermint in there, absolutely as well. And Chris Leno is saying, "Wow, that is strong." I mean, it's bottled at 43%, so I mean, it's on the lower end of things. As Japanese whiskey, you know, a lot of this kind of stuff these tend to be. Peter Gilmore, do the Japanese make a lot of whiskey? I've seen some in Harvey Nichols at 2,000 plus. Well, why is Japanese whiskey tend to be more expensive, and why? What has happened?
So, the biggest issue here is that there has been an explosion in demand for Japanese whiskey. And I'm going to say the last 10 years, let's say 10, 15 years or so. 15 years ago, you would have to go to one of a couple of specialist bars in London to be able to get anything like a range of Japanese whiskey. But there was this explosion in demand, and suddenly everyone is wanting to drink Yamazaki 18 and Hibiki 21 and Hakushu 18 years old. And nobody told us 18 years ago that they were going to be ordering all of this whiskey. So we just do not have the stocks. And so this is the one thing you cannot cheat on. We cannot make up the age. If we're going to put it 18 years on the label of a bottle of whiskey, every drop of liquid in that bottle must be at least 18 years old. And for some people who are listening in here who might not have heard this side of it before, remember the age statement on a bottle of whiskey doesn't actually tell you how old all the whiskey in your bottle is. It tells you the age of the youngest drop of liquid in there. So if you have a Hakushu 12-year-old, well, there might well be whiskey in there that is 15, 18, 20, whatever years old as well. What I'm guaranteeing is that there is nothing younger than 12. There is nothing that is 11 years, 11 months and 20 days. That would make the whole bottle, the whole batch, an 11-year-old whiskey. But so that we cannot cheat. Now, one of the things that and in Japan certainly, but actually in Scotland as well. So one of the ways of trying to ensure that we have enough whiskey to match the demand is by introducing things like the Hakushu we're drinking this evening, the Distiller's Reserve. And so if I put the bottle close enough to the screen there, big improvement on my face, I'm sure we'll all agree. There's no age statement on this. Now, just tasting this, we can tell that this is whiskey that has had a good period of maturation. And we know that the Japanese follow the same regulations as Scotch whiskey has. So because it says that it is whiskey, therefore it would have been aged for a minimum of 3 years. I do not know the exact figures here, but I would be amazed if there was anything as young as that. But what I'm fairly sure we will do every time there's a batch of this is use a much wider range of ages of casks. So some of this, and please, I'm going to make these figures up. Please don't go quoting me or going back to my bosses with this. There's probably whiskey that is 7 or 8 years old in this, but there will be some whiskey that's been maturing in casks for 13, 14, 15, maybe even a bit longer. And it's that taking the age statement off, having an NAS, a non-age statement whiskey. So again, just attention to detail here. It's not a non-age whiskey. It's very much been aged. It's been matured in oak. It's a non-age statement whiskey. We're just not telling you how old it is, but we've got a much wider range of different cask ages, different cask sizes, different cask types, which is another way that we can guarantee you the complexity and the depth of flavour that we're looking for here.
It's also a way that we can try Japanese whiskey and have been able to over the last few years at a decent price. So you've got things like the Beaky Harmony and Select and this, for example, Distiller's Reserve. And it's been a way for Japan to continue releasing whiskey without the pressures of having to release age statements whiskey. And that's why you will probably go to Harvey Nichols and see a £2,000 bottle of an age statement whiskey. This is all Bill Murray's fault, by the way, in Lost in Translation. This wouldn't have happened had he have not had that glass of Hibiki 18 in that film. No, but it's not all his fault. But it's been a good way for everyone. But I have read that the stock is coming back. I don't know where I read that, and we will be seeing more age statements coming out soon.
Absolutely. Well, and so on the one hand, ourselves, Nika, are all looking to expand production. What can we do? And then what we've also seen, as within Scotland, as in America, there's this slew of new distilleries opening as well. And they're going to be doing some really, really interesting, creative stuff there. So it's a very exciting time to be involved in whiskey generally, but in Japanese whiskey in particular.
Jonathan Childs is writing, is it right the Japanese whiskey can contain whiskey not made in Japan?
It is, yes. They last year, maybe even 2 years ago now, they tightened the regulations, but they're not regulations. The guidelines.
The guideline in Japan now. It's not law like it is in Scotland.
Absolutely. So it's almost been a gentleman's agreement. But there are some Japanese whiskies that do contain Scotch whiskey. Now, Suntory don't do that. We adhere to those guidelines, if you like. Anything that Suntory produce, Yamazaki, Hibiki, Hakushu, Toki, these are all 100% whiskies that are made in Japan. I guess the slight proviso here, or the little rider clause, is the barley won't be Japanese. Barley does not grow easily or comfortably in Japan. Barley is quite rare and very, very expensive in Japan. So the barley will come from, for us, most of the barley actually comes from Yorkshire.
There you go. Just around where Antonia is staying right now, isn't it?
Oi, get out of my barley field, Antonia.
Well, absolutely, and I think that was Suntory, but yeah, I mean, if you were with us at Porus here, we did a kind of Japanese special ages ago, where we were right at the start where this had come out. I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and other companies made no kind of qualms about saying stuff like Nika from the barrel, which is now not going to be called Japanese whiskey, as it is containing some Scotch. People think it's Ben Nevis, I can't remember. But I think it's just a tightening of the guidelines is what it's been. So you can, I think, still not by law use non-Japanese whiskey and call it Japanese whiskey, but I don't think it's looked upon now well because of the guidelines.
No, and but then also the other, I guess I've now got to add another little proviso, a little rider clause here, because having said that, we do not, everything we produce in Japan is Japanese whiskey. It is, but there's also a whiskey that Suntory produce, which you'll get in find in travel retail, called AO, AO, which is proudly a world whiskey, because Beam Suntory have got bourbon distilleries and they've got Scotch distilleries, and they have a Canadian distillery. So they have created a whiskey which is proudly using casks from all around the world to create a world whiskey.
Sure, and that sounds pretty good. I'm going to read out a few more of these tasting notes that are coming in because they're coming in thick and fast now. Real Boinga, cherries on the nose. I can imagine sitting in a ripe fruit orchard. Richard Wingrove. Yeah, I don't know the extent of mixing they were doing. Hopefully it wouldn't have gone on with the single malts. I think that's in reference to something said earlier. Pete Burrett, getting bananas and grass with a hint of smoke. So yeah, this is a mix between, is it lightly peated and there's some heavy peated malts in here as well. Pexman, a little dash of water works really well with this one. Ian Turner, fruit cocktail with a small hint of smoke on the nose. Richard Wingrove, nice amount of fruit on the nose, bit of herbs as well. Chris Leno, becoming more mellow as I sip it up. I think it was because I'm tasting this after several 4% beers. This is quite sweet and smooth. Anthony Mullins is getting the smoke, but still a lovely fruit coming through. I mean, for me, it's not, again, it's not, as you were saying earlier, we're talking subtle here. It's like for me on the finish, there's like a kind of wispy smoke note and kind of like a bitter, I don't know, maybe a coffee kind of note that's coming through as well, maybe mocha, but it's definitely not a big smoky number, this one at all.
No, not at all. Again, it's one little part of the whole equation, the whole recipe here. And after just nosing my first sip, I got that little sweet hit of caramel coming through from the wood char, which I thought was just delicious.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
That's right.
One of the, where the Hakushu distillery is actually located, it's and basically it's in a forest. It's at the foot of the Japanese Alps, which gives us a couple of very different contributors to the overall flavour here. So one is it's a very humid area, but also it is very seasonal. So we really get all 4 seasons there. The weather changes a lot here, but it is cooler than where the Yamazaki distillery is as well. So because it's cooler, but we get a lot of variation, this has a big influence on the maturation and why there is this this delicacy and this softness to it. And the other thing that drives this is the water source. Because the water from the distiller, one of the reasons that our master distiller at the time, 50 years ago, chose this site was that he was looking around Japan everywhere for a site for the new distillery. He stopped off here and was having a meal, the Japanese tea ceremony as well, and realized just how soft the water here was, because it's come down from the mountains, it's been filtered through granite. It is some of the softest water that any whiskey is made from anywhere. So this does have that very delicate, soft, creamy mouthfeel that we're getting here. All of the flavors that people are talking about, and it's subtle finesse to it, but there's an awful lot. No one's all getting it's not one note or two notes. Just go look at all these tasting notes people are coming up with. There's an amazing range of flavor in this whiskey.
Yeah, it's
just need to give it a little time.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are saying that as well, that leaving it a little bit and it's opening up, and lots of people using things like Anthony Mullen saying getting custard on the taste, kind of fruit salad trifle. Malcolm Tucker, more peach, lemon zest shortbread, heat of black pepper finishing with smoke and wood from the barrel. Ian Turner, smoke on the finish is very subtle, spice but not harsh, lovely. And Real Boing, I agree with the custard with the fruit still present and a hint of smokiness. It's absolutely, a lot of people are talking stone fruits, apricots, peach as well. That seems to be quite a common note that we've got here throughout these tasting notes. It's definitely complex. It's really wonderful stuff. It's subtle, which I absolutely love. And thank you very much for talking us through it, David. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, talking to you. And yeah,
it's been my pleasure. It really has. Thank you so much for having me back.
You're welcome. What's next in the portfolio? What's next in the portfolio? What can we have next? We've never had a Glenrothes on here, I don't think.
Okay, then I would imagine that we should have a chat and put that right, because there's a lot of very exciting things happening with Glenrothes going forward. You know what I'd like to throw into the equation at some point here? We've got a new blended Scotch whiskey.
Oh, there you go.
It's a blended Scotch whiskey, but blended by Japanese whiskey makers called Ardnamurchan.
Oh, okay. I think okay. That sounds interesting. Okay, that's a thing for the poor and sick.
I want to. Today's been all about the single malt, but I want to wave the flag for a good quality blend as well, because blends are wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone here in Pour and Sip has learned about how wonderful blends are, and they've learned that there's no such thing as single malts. Lots of snobbiness and those kind of attitudes have been rectified here on Pour and Sip with the amount of amazing blended whiskey we've tried. A couple more notes. Steve Cooper, lovely on the palate, reminds me of those banana pick and mix sweets, delicious. Steve Con Williams, this should be drank in the garden on a summer's evening with friends. Carl Willock, very smooth, sweet on the nose, spice and smoke, and a lot going on with this whiskey. Exactly what you were saying, David. Thank you so much for talking to us, and I hope we will see you again, and we'll definitely speak to the Pour and Sippers about getting that Ardnamurchan in. So thank you very much.
Right.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Andy. Cheers. Bye.
Right. That was a great way to start in Japan. Now, I'm going to invite our next guest, Alex, if he's here. Yes, he is. How's it going, Alex?
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Andy.
How Good evening. I'm very well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So I had a bit of a slight wobble with my technology this evening. So I'm joining you from my iPad. So yeah, I don't know why. I think I've left all my kind of technological skill back during lockdown. So
This feels very lockdowny, to be honest with you now. It's like, I can't work, I'm on mute.
I know. You thought I would have got all those excuses out of the way 2 years ago, but hey ho. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Alex. So we're going to be talking all things Glenfiddich and the 15-year-old.
We are.
First, have you been on Pour and Sip before? I can't remember. Or have you?
I have not, no, but I've done a few things with Master of Malt like in the past. So it's always nice to work with you guys, but I've not actually done a Pour and Sip before. So yeah, I just joined the start of the chat and heard from David, and it's always nice to hear from David as well. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for those who don't know you, please just talk to us a little bit about yourself and how you've ended up in your role brand ambassador for Glenfiddich.
Absolutely. So yeah, my name is Alex Walker. I'm the national brand ambassador for Glenfiddich here in the UK. So predominantly I take care of anything that is south of the wall, so England, and anything that isn't Scotland. But my paths do cross over into Scotland as well. So I've been in my current role for around 4.5 years now, from a bartending background from the on-trade. So I've always had a massive passion for spirits in general, and just bartending, hospitality, and this wonderful industry that we're all in. So yeah, very, very excited to talk to you all about Glenfiddich tonight, and talk about the Glenfiddich Solera 15. I also have a bottle in my hand as well, so it's...
I've got a little dram, a little.
Yeah.
I did have a bottle of that. I did have a bottle of that, but it has gone because I finished it, obviously.
It's always a good sign.
It's always a good sign. But talk to us about Glenfiddich. Give us a little bit of history. It's one of those names that everyone just absolutely recognises. It's just goes hand in hand with whiskey. It's, you know, for many, many years, it's just, we all know it. But talk to us about it and what makes it so special.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you on the call that don't know anything about Glenfiddich, I might as well start from the beginning.
Do it.
Give you a little bit of a brief history on Glenfiddich and where we kind of sit in the world of whiskey and in single malt. So Glenfiddich is an old Gaelic word. If you split Glenfiddich in half, Glen means valley and Fiddick is meaning deer. So Glenfiddich means valley of the deer. So we are a family owned company, and we have been for, it will be 136 years this Christmas. And Glenfiddich was the brand that started it all, essentially. So we started distilling back in 1887. Our construction began, we started to build our distillery in the springtime of 1886 at the helm of our founder, William Grant, hence why the name of the company is William Grant & Sons. So basically, he spent most of his time around Dufftown, which is where we are. We are based in Dufftown, just north of the town. If you don't know where Dufftown is, we're about an hour in between Aberdeen and Inverness. So we're in a prime whiskey making region in the heart of Speyside, surrounded by a lot of other wonderful whiskey distilleries. One of them is actually on our site. So one of them is the Balvenie, which is our sister company. But back to Glenfiddich. So we were founded by William Grant, 1886. First drop of new make spirit fell off our stills on Christmas Day in 1887. And ever since then, so 135.5 years later, independently family owned, kind of pushing the whiskey category forward in terms of what we can do, and in terms of what we can kind of do in the world of whiskey as well. So I think it's actually a really good kind of whiskey that we're talking about today, just to talk about some of those kind of disruptive kind of maverick decisions that we made, all that led us up to our journey and where we are now in 2023.
Awesome. Well, talk to us about, you know, we'll get onto the particular dram that we're drinking, but when I was saying about what makes Glenfiddich special, like let's talk about the house characteristic of Glenfiddich. How is this achieved through the production process, the maturation process? Give us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 1887, Glenfiddich was always known as a top dresser malt because we had a particular style of whiskey. The style of whiskey that we have at Glenfiddich now has changed quite a lot over the years, from various different things such as fuel sources where we could dry our barley with, and the availability of casks as well. So I suppose where we are now, Glenfiddich is known for being a light and fruity style of whiskey. And kind of everything that we make, all the way from our 12-year-old, all the way up to things like our 50-year-old, for example, there's always that kind of golden thread running through everything that we do. And that lends itself down to our house style. So our house style, if you've had the pleasure of coming to Glenfiddich and walking around our wonderful distillery and maybe smelt some of the aromas walking through the still house and the warehouses and things like that, our house style comes from various different things. So our production method, we ferment for quite a long time, so between 68 and 72 hours, so quite a long fermentation. And we distill quite uniquely as well. So we have got 3 different types of still. We've got 1 wash still, and then we have 2 different types of still, spirit still at our distillery as well. So we have a witch's hat and we have a boil ball as well. So what we do is actually combine those 2 different types of distillate together, providing kind of light notes and heavy notes, combining what we have as the base notes of Glenfiddich. So our new make, when it comes off the still, as notes of, I would say, lots of fresh cut grass, pear drops is a big one, and then when we add the influence of the oak during maturation as well, you get lovely rich vanillas. So it's always a difficult one. I was listening to David saying that he was talking through the tasting notes of the previous dram, and there's so many different people with so many different types of palates, but I suppose kind of a holy trinity of flavor that I always am looking for with a Glenfiddich would be vanilla, oak, and apples and pears as kind of a holy trinity. And everything else is personal. For me, every single time I try new Glenfiddichs, I always look for something new. And that's what really excites me about the world of whiskey as well.
So it's literally, you just mentioned apples there, and the first tasting that's coming is this nose. This reminds me of my mum's chopping apples to make a pie in the summer.
Yes, I would say that it's definitely more of, again, that's why I don't, and I'm sure you're the same when you've done tastings in the past with consumers. If I was to say to people, if we was all in a room, for example, if I said to you, think of an apple, and everyone thinks of an apple, and I'd go, okay, raise your hand if you thought of a green apple, you thought of a red apple, you thought of a gala apple, you thought of a pink lady apple. So yeah, I think the apple is kind of a focal point, and then you can kind of just interpret those different flavors.
Has anyone ever said to you about their mum's chopping apples to make?
Never. I've never had that. That's a very unique. But again, these tasting notes are all personal, and they remind people of certain situations and nostalgia. And if it is that, then that's amazing.
Yeah, that's the great thing about whiskey, is it can take you to certain places in your childhood, nostalgic memories of certain things. And I don't know if this is the power of suggestion coming through here. Now, Carl Willock's an apple on the nose, real boing of floral and honeyed notes on the nose, like those honeys made with giving the bees a lot of flowers to deal with. Interesting.
Like honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle, yeah, absolutely. Steve Conwell Williams, passion fruit and the smell of leftover, I think that's Coca-Cola soaked ham from Christmas for Boxing Day sandwiches on the nose. Just look at that.
I love these tasting notes that are coming in.
That's outrageous. That's an amazing tasting note, Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose these are very, very diverse and very complex tasting notes that people are coming up with. And I suppose that lends itself to the actual whiskey. Mm-hmm. So should we talk a little bit about how...
Well, I think we should definitely go into talking about the whiskey. But first, before doing that, talk to us about the Solera system, because I think that's pretty important for understanding the whiskey.
Yes, absolutely. So... on the front of this bottle, we have the word Solera. So usually the word Solera is associated with the world of sherry production. So if you are not familiar with the sherry or the Solera process that they use in places like Jerez or where they make sherry, for example, it's quite a complicated process to get your head around with me just explaining it. But the easiest way that I can explain the system without kind of butchering it a little bit is to imagine this. So the word Solera means to ground or to floor. So the actual Solera system is a process where you combine different aged liquids from various different casks and have a continual, consistent product at the bottom of the Solera process. So the easiest way to imagine this on a virtual way is to imagine a pyramid of casks. So you have 3 at the bottom, 2 in the middle, 1 at the top. The bottom 3 are completely full of liquid, and this is important to note. The Solera never gets emptied more than halfway. So we have the Solera full to the top. We empty it halfway. So it's always half full or half empty, depending on how you look at life. We leave some space in the bottom 3. We fill in the middle. We fill in the space in the bottom 3 with the middle 2, and so on and so forth. So it trickles down like a champagne fountain, for example. All trickles down from the top. You have young liquids at the top, older liquid to the middle, and aged liquid to the bottom. They all trickle down and combine at the bottom in the Solera. Now, back in the kind of mid-90s, so kind of like that late 80s, early 90s, mid-90s, at the world of Glenfiddich, there was a huge amount of experimentation going on. And we kind of went to Spain and we got absorbed in the world of sherry production, and we saw the Solera system in action. And after you've just heard me talking about the Solera process, we thought this was absolutely fascinating. And how can we kind of like bring this kind of this craftsmanship back to Scotland? And we kind of thought to ourselves, if you go to Jerez and see the Solera system in action, it's actually very, very complicated, and it's very technical and amazingly crafted as well. So we really wanted to pay homage to that, but do it in a slightly kind of Glenfiddich way. So that's a little bit about the Solera system and how that works. But how we do it is a little bit different, which really does add the complexity and the kind of I suppose the mixability, the likability, this is a crowd pleaser. Every single time I do a tasting with this, it's one of those whiskies, I suppose much like our 21-year-old as well, that just goes down like a house on fire. Everyone loves it to bits.
Yeah, it's always one of those as well. Like, I think there's a lot of snobbery about, people where it's like, oh, that's 40% whiskey, blah, 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 you can buy it in the supermarket. But for me, it's an absolute, this one is one that if I did go to the supermarket and I see it on the shelves, which you usually do, you just look at that and you go, that's an absolute guaranteed great bargain purchase. 100%. And it's a really good whiskey. And if I'm going to have whiskey with friends and they're around, so I'm just going to buy something there from the supermarket. This is absolutely one of those whiskies that I would, without doubt, be able to recommend to go, this is a really good whiskey. You can buy it in the shops.
Yeah, 100%. I think because it reaches and it has so many different applications. It's got such a breadth and variety of flavor in there as well, and so much complexity that it really does work. Yeah, and it does kind of get the palates going of a lot of different people. So
yeah, absolutely. So, talk to us about the casks used in this. It's 15 years old, bottled at 40%.
It is. So so going back to the Solera system. So after we went to Spain and we got absorbed in the world of sherry, we was at the helm of our fifth malt master, a gentleman by the name of David C. Stewart, MBE, who last year celebrated his 60th year with the company. He's an amazing, amazing person. In the timeline of Glenfiddich, there's only actually been 6 people that have been responsible for making Glenfiddich, and he was the 5th person ever. We are now on to our 6th malt master, Brian Kinsman, amazingly talented person as well, the brain behind the experimental series and a lot of our Grand series whiskies as well. So we thought we'd pay homage to the Solera system, but seeing it in action and trying to replicate that out at whiskey distillery is kind of a little bit difficult. So what we decided to do was build a vat. Now, we built a Solera vat, and if you get the chance to come up to Glenfiddich, you'll find our Solera vat in warehouse number 8. And we built that and we constructed it as a vessel. Now, we do a Solera process or a Solera system, but just kind of turned on its head. So what we have in this bottle is 3 different types of oak. So we have ex-American, so ex-bourbon, ex-European, so Oloroso sherry casks, and we have the inclusion of some new American oak casks in there as well. And how do we replicate the Solera process? So what we do, or what we did back in 1997, was get our empty Solera vat, and we filled it up with a combination of 3 different types of oak, all minimum aged for 15 years, except for the slight difference with the new oak, where we actually do a cask finish using our own 15-year-old American oak Glenfiddich. We put it into a new American oak cask for about 4 months, and then that goes into the mix as well. So if you can visualize this, we empty the casks into an almost kind of a valley, like a trough. We empty them in, we feed it into the Solera vat, and we leave it there for about 6 months. Now, what this is doing, it's allowing those whiskies, all minimum 15 years. There have been traces of whiskey that's in there, 16, 17 years, all to provide a consistent flavor. We leave them in the Solera vat for 6 months, and then what we do is we drain it halfway, like the Solera process, and then we fill it back up again. So we've been doing that since 1997. So 26 years, 25 and a half years later, the vat has never been emptied more than halfway. Now, to give you an idea of scale, if you compare our vat to, let's say, an American standard barrel, so about 220 liters, our Solera vat is 38,000 liters in size. So it's quite a colossal vessel. If you see it in action and you see people walking past it, it's actually quite comical, because it's kind of like one of those forced perspective. Yeah. You see people walking past it, filling it up. It gets fed up from the bottom and fed in. So yeah, it's been like that for the past, well, since 1997, 98, and continual mixing and marrying of these liquids, resulting in our Glenfiddich Solera 15.
Yeah, I mean, that's I would love to see it. I've never been down, and that sounds. I would absolutely love to see it. I'm just going to read out some of these notes that are coming through. There's quite a few coming through now. Pecksman, very smooth, bit of cinnamon at the end. This is a really niche tasting note. Love it. Yanis, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I know you've been on the show many times, and I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong again. The nose reminds me of the paints I used when I used to paint Lord of the Rings figurines, but in a good way. So there you go. That could be.
Is it? I wonder if he means kind of like a varnish.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're saying. Yeah, that kind of varnish you use for paint. In this particular case, it's the Lord of the Rings figurines. So
perfect.
Yeah,
I think what's quite cool about this whiskey, I remember the first time that I tried this. I mean, back when I was 18 and starting to learn about spirits, and I'd had my fair share of terrible whiskeys and terrible vodkas and things like that. And I remember trying this, especially when I was a bartender as well, and getting to know about spirits on the back bar. You reach from a spirit from the back bar and just kind of see what's going on and what's the story about it. And I remember trying this. And the first time that I tried it, it kind of had those kind of notes of like a rye whiskey. And I don't know if it was the inclusion of the new oak. And when I say it was a very small amount of new oak that actually goes into the mix, it's a very small, much more there for a seasoning capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminded me of a rye whiskey when you get that kind of pinch at the sides of the mouth. And it was just that kind of, something going there as well. So I think that might be where the slightly kind of varnished, kind of really deep kind of nose comes from, is maybe from the new oak. But I think ultimately what makes this stand out from something like, for example, our 12-year-old is, for me, it's one of the best things that we do because it's our Glenfiddich DNA in a bottle, right? It's our bread and butter single malt, lovely, rich, vanilla, sweet. This one for me has that slight kind of more, it's got a bit more dryness to it. So it's got a little bit more of that European oak kind of tannin coming through, a lot more of those kind of dry, kind of woody spices. So your nutmegs and your cinnamons and things like that. And then that almost dryness that dries your palate out with the new oak as well. So it makes you kind of go back and have another sip.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of the people are saying this exact same thing. Real Bòcan tastes very smooth vanilla, honey, mint with a growing minty finish. Steve Conwell Williams getting lots of oil and complex tasted. Hard to pin down for me. Raspberry crumble. Steve Conwell Williams, pour and sip. You've done it again. Another prejudice smashed. Glenfiddich, here I come. I wonder why there's any prejudice there in the first place. It's amazing distillery. P. Barrett, tastes of Christmas pudding, but very light. That's the sherry notes there. And a happy and cheerful dram, smooth and welcoming, beautiful dram. Jonathan Charles, lots of apple. But interestingly, our whiskey club didn't like the orchard experiment, Glenfiddich. I mean, whiskey is subjective. Anthony Mullins, wow, wasn't expecting that taste. Such a smooth, malty taste with a touch of peppercorn at the end. So good. Ian Turner, smell the sherry influence on the nose. Beautiful. Malcolm Tucker, hobnob biscuits. Sherried fruit coming more to the fore. Fresh grated ginger, heat honeying on the finish. Richard Wingrove getting the usual sherry profile of fruit cake. Always a good one for me. Absolutely. I mean,
I love those tasting notes so much, especially the one about the ginger as well.
Yeah.
It's that almost kind of pithy ginger, kind of a lot of that kind of, I mean, fresh apple skin is what I always get from Glenfiddich anyway. And I'm sorry to hear the comment about the orchard, which is it's a real shame. It's one of my favorite things that we do. I think it's really, really interesting.
And that's one of the great things about whiskey.
Absolutely. There's so many whiskeys for so many different people as well.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of brings me on to the next point. So there have been Glenfiddich experimentations and stuff like that. What is happening in the future? Are there more releases like that coming out
in the future? So I suppose a safer answer for me to say on this particular point.
We've had many NDAs on this program on Pour and Sip before.
Okay, so what I can say is that it's kind of like it's quite a political answer what I'm going to say on this one. So what I will say is that we're always experimenting at Glenfiddich. So our most recent release was last year with the Orchard Experiment. We've always got our fingers in many different types of variants in terms of casks and and sourcing different oak types from around the world. As far as I'm concerned, we've got one of the best kind of wood programs going at our distillery. More recently, I mean, literally back in March this year, we did our latest release in the Grand series as well, which is a different branch of the experimentation tree, I suppose. So we have our experimental series, which we started off in 2016, really kind of like shaking up the world of whiskey with cask finishes. And then we most recently introduced our Grand series as well, which is a range kind of, again, exploring cask finishes, but from further afield. So the Caribbean, France, and more recently in Japan as well. So going back to Japan, we have just done a 29-year Grand Yozakura, which is an ex-Awamori cask finish, which is absolutely delicious. So limited release. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing in the pipeline right now. But who knows, watch this space. As soon as I get any, kind of flutters of what's coming up, then I'm sure that if I get invited back, I'll be able to tell you. But at this current moment, I'm not too sure. But take it on, this one, and guarantee we're always coming up with new things at Glenfiddich.
Absolutely. And I think hopefully we'll get to try some more Glenfiddich on this, because I think it may be the first Glenfiddich we've had in, I think, coming up to 2.5 years doing ports. Wow. And we've had many, many a whiskey in these every month. But Carl Willock has definitely opened my eyes to this brand, a really enjoyable drink. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So
perfect. I can leave a happy man.
Yeah, you've done your job, Alex. You've done your job. That's the main thing. Thank you very much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. If you want to stick around to the end and listen,
I will. I look forward to hearing from the other people as well. I'm looking forward to it.
And we'll bring you back on for a little chat at the end.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your drams. I'm going to join you a little bit later on, and thank you, Andy, as well, for having me.
You're welcome, and I'll see you in a minute. Cheers.
All right.
Right. Well, time is moving quickly, and I've just noticed it. So it's been wonderful so far. But now it's time for our next dram. So I'm going to invite Antonia onto the screen. How are you doing?
Hi, Andy. I'm very well, thanks. I apologise if I'm selecting the air occasionally. I think some Highland midges have me down from the distillery. And as soon as I opened the bottle, they flew in the window, which it's about 30 degrees around here. So I had to shut the window, so I'm now like sweltering. So excuse me, I'm a bit sweaty and batting the air. I don't have to rest.
No, no one thinks you're insane. Just don't do it now. But you've said anyway now, so it's okay. Now I messed up the pronunciation after you very politely told me.
No, you did very well.
No, so we are talking all things
Ardnamurchan.
Ardnamurchan. That's what I got stuck with. Ardnamurchan. It was the k, the ch. I was unsure in the moment. So, firstly, before talking about Ard, I've forgotten it again. What's this? Once it gets into your head, something like that.
Just call it AD.
AD. Okay, there we go. We're trying the AD tonight. So, talk to us a little bit about yourself first. How you got into whiskey? What your current role is?
Wow. Okay. Well, I obviously followed the obvious route into whiskey, which was through music.
Oh wow!
Well, it's life's always a series of kind of blunders and happy opportunities. So I studied music when I was younger and taught the piano, and then that was in Paris, and so I had to come back to Scotland, and I found a job with Paul Roger, in fact, Champagne, and sold wine and champagne for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. And then I fell into whiskey. So from about 2009, I started working with Adelphi, which is in fact run by my brother. There's Alex Bruce. There's no nepotism at all involved there. But it was a very small company at the time. We only had Adelphi bottlings, which I don't know if anyone who's listening has tasted some, but each time we have to allocate. So I'd be sitting at my computer, and Alex would send the allocation for the UK, which would be 6 bottles of Kalila, 12 bottles of here and there. And anyway, so it couldn't really go on. And like that. So that's when we decided to build a distillery, which turned out to be Ardnamurchan.
Okay, well, that brings us on to that point. Building a distillery. That sounds like quite a huge undertaking. Talk to us about Ardnamurchan Distillery.
So
Where
it is in, strangely enough, on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula. So it's on the West Highlands. You go up through the most beautiful drive ever. I mean, it's the loveliest commute in the world through Glencoe. And normally there's a little ferry waiting for you just before Fort William called the Corran Ferry, but it's been broken. Well, the small version is still working, but it only takes a few cars, so the tailbacks are quite considerable. So at the moment we go shooting past the Harry Potter Viaduct in Glenfinnan and up and over the back of the long arm, which is Ardnamurchan Peninsula. So if you go right to the end of the peninsula, you get to Kilhoan, which is where you get a ferry across to Tobermory and Mull, to give you an idea of where that is. So we're about halfway along the peninsula, about 40 minutes from either end, depending on how you drive. 30 for some. It's one of the most beautiful and worst roads in the world. It's about the only roads where I'm driving myself and feel sick. There's lots of oops, and very narrow. You have to kind of squeech into the side to let large lorries past.
Has Ardnamurchan ever seen the distillery before?
No. Well, our nearest neighbours are now Nicknean, who are on the opposite peninsula. They came slightly after us, and yes, Ben Nevis, I suppose, in Fort William.
So what made you choose Ardnamurchan? What is it about that location?
Well, so the mother company of Ardnamurchan is Adelphi, and the two, well, sadly we lost Keith last year, but the Donald, the owner of Adelphi, he lives and protects, the wildlife and everything, looks after the Ardnamurchan, all the bits of Ardnamurchan that he owns. It's very, and it was seemed to be logical because he had the exact place for it with a water coming down the hill, beautiful water. He has a wood chip business already, a renewable. So there was our renewable energy. We wanted to be as eco as possible. We have one boiler which runs only on renewable wood chip, and if that breaks down, which it quite often does, then production stops for the day, or as in last year for 2 weeks while we mended it. So that's our. I mean, obviously, the barley can't be grown there because, as like in Japan, there's not really any way you can grow it. It's from my parents' farm, which is near about half an hour north of Edinburgh in Fife, and that's the only thing that travels a long distance, apart from us who go up and down quite regularly, which is lovely. Any excuse to be up there. But it's very much a local distillery. We wanted it to be called Ardnamurchan, so it was actually part of where it sat, and the whole team up there are local. We're very much involved in local things going on, and it's just really nice.
That's really good. And I mean, you were talking about like the kinds of the green credentials about how important are those at the distillery, and what are you doing
they're very important. We've applied for the last 3 years now, I think, for the Vibes Awards, and we've been in the last few. Last year we're down to the shortlist, which is really nice. We try and get greener every year. We've obviously got reed beds for some of the water coming off. We feed all the draff to animals. In fact, during lockdown, we had to keep going because we had a contract to feed all the livestock in the peninsula. So we needed its draff. And to show you a kind of a really good story I heard from Alex about the sort of, to illustrate the circular economy, is that he was one day eating some venison in Ardnamurchan restaurant in Glasgow, and the owners of that come from the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, so we're quite close to them, and they serve our whiskey and everything. And he was having a dram and eating some venison, and he realised that this venison had not only come from Ardnamurchan, but had eaten draff from our distillery.
Okay, that very much is a circular economy. It's all getting the circle of life there. And talk to us about the production methods. So talk to us about the distillation, the wood policy. It's really interesting for a new distillery to know what you guys are doing and how you're creating this house style, what you envisaged about the house style.
Well, when we saw, it's Alex really who's the mastermind behind it all, and he took lots of advice. Obviously, the whiskey world is incredibly generous. People help each other out a lot. He received lots of help from other distilleries, and he decided to go down the sort of medium route. So nothing's too big. It can't be too big anyway. No part of the distillery can be bigger than 3 meters 40, which is the size of the road. So it all had to fit up the road. A bit did fall off because somebody followed their sat nav and landed in a school playground. But apart from that, there were no accidents. We have 7 washbacks. Most of them are Oregon pine and 2 stainless steel ones. Mm-hmm. We have only two stills, so the wash still is 10,000 liters and the spirit still is 6,000. We have what else is different that we do? Do you want to know geeky things like our yeast or?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Oh, I know. Well, the spirit still has one of those ball. It's a neck and ball thing which promotes reflux, which is very important. I think one of the things we're very pleased to note that as our whiskies have evolved, they have a little oiliness to them. Mm-hmm. And obviously not going to compare ourselves to the Great Clynelish, but we would like to. There is a little oiliness which is really pleasing, and we're looking, to make a really nice dram. So something that has the nose, and then there's a story to be told. In fact, our motto is "Taste the Story," because we want someone to have a nice dram. We also, like my predecessor on this show, we don't have an age statement. No, I think it was, who said that?
That was David talking about.
That was David, right. So we decided not to go down the age statement route because when we did there was some Adelphi bottlings. Sorry to go back to that, but one of which was a 6-year-old Glenrothes. We were given samples of a 6-year-old Glenrothes, and we thought, well, that's a bit young. Then we tried it, and it was just so incredibly complex and then amazing. I mean, it was very high in alcohol, obviously, but 68.9 or something. But everyone loved it. It sold out immediately, and we got sister casks. So we got a 6, a 7, and 8, and a 9-year-old, and those whiskies were just incredible. And we realised that the age doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously, it has to be a certain age. We didn't release ours until it was 6 in 2020 during lockdown.
Sure, and obviously being a new distillery and you're producing your own, obviously releasing age statements is harder right now. But is there plans to release an age statement at some point? Or are you never going to?
I'm not sure. We turn 10 next year, so we started making spirits in 2014. Mm-hmm. We'll see. For the moment, we really. So you're drinking. Sorry, our core.
Yeah, let's talk about the AD. Let's talk about it. Let's talk what's going on with this dram. We're drinking. This is the core from the range. Yes. Yeah. This
is something we hope not to run out of. We started off because we were literally jumped into the ether of Zoom tastings. We launched our whiskey over a Zoom tasting. We'd sent out little packs like you do. We call them the first aid kits, very cleverly, and they went around the world. And we social distanced at different rooms of the distillery, and each one talked about a dram. So this is our baby, and this is so exactly half and half peated, unpeated spirit. We mainly we get our bourbon casks, obviously from America, Old Forester, and is it Buffalo Trace? I can't remember exactly the other one we get it from. Anyway, so American bourbon, and then we get our sherry cask from Miguel Martin in Spain. He has the most wonderful casks, and also a lovely PX from Jimenez Spinola, who made the most amazing. If you have a drop, it's just to die for. So we have a few for our special things, and for instance, the sherry. We just had a sherry release, and in that is mainly Oloroso casks, but we put a little bit of PX in that as well. Just so we've noticed the things we noticed. I don't know what the tasting note is going to say, but the things which I find come back quite a lot in all our whiskies is a slightly lemony note, a saltiness. There's a maritime quality. I don't really like saying maritime, but there is a saltiness. And I don't know if that's because we're right next to the sea, and there's quite a warmth in the certainly in Warehouse 1. We noticed if there's an upstairs and a downstairs, if we put casks upstairs, they mature much more quickly. Sure. And we're so quite near the Gulf Stream. They do seem to be maturing very well. We keep trying and tasting them to make sure. So what else? Oh yeah, so this will be 65% bourbon casks and 35% sherry, just because we wanted the bourbon allows the whiskey just to kind of be itself a bit more than sherry. It doesn't, it just lets the style shine through. It's, and the peatiness, so we peat at 30 ppm. Peatiness is more like a kind of beach bonfire than a slap in the face with a herring. That kind of level of peatiness. It's sort of nice, gentle. It's supposed to be a sort of gentle West Highland dram.
You should put that on the website.
Sorry.
You should put that statement on the website. It's more like a bonfire than a slap in the face by a herring.
Oh, a kipper. I meant to say a kipper.
Kipper, yeah. There's a lot of notes coming through at the moment. I'm just trying to work out where they've gone from the. Yanis saying nose-wise, wow, I'm getting a mix of sherry, smoke, spices. Not at all what I was expecting from a Highland whiskey. Malcolm Tucker put my nose in the glass. It's like I'm in a charcuterie. Ham cured in sea salt, then hung to dry over smoke. Anthony Orange, you know that smell of a brand new tyre? That's what I'm getting on the nose. Stuart Pilling, is saying, heading to the distillery later this month. Looking forward to the drive there, as you were saying. Okay. Anything can happen.
We're quite modern in our. So basically, one of our eco things is we've done away with all packaging. We did have for this we had a recycled and recyclable kind of cardboard, quite simple cardboard case. But apart from the fact that the first one smelled of elephant dung, we decided there was no point because people just throw them out anyway. So we just decided to go for it and have a naked bottle. But we do have this QR code on the back, which has it's like basically an open book. It's a transparent journal of everything we do from the field to your glass. So if you want to be really geeky, it'll tell you exactly which cask went in to this particular bottling, what the tractor driver ate for lunch, who bottled it. It's really, you can be as geeky as you like, but it has all the information in there. And we've managed now to translate it into several languages. So you can click on your language.
That's awesome. I mean, there's a lot more of that happening in the industry at the moment. Things like Waterford are doing that. And it's really great to see. What does AD stand for, by the way?
Ardnamurchan Distillery.
There you go. So it's not an ad. It's Ardnamurchan.
Well, actually, it's good that you said that because we started off when our bottles had the batch date on it. So the first one said 09/20/01, which was the first batch. But then because it was lockdown, we had no idea how it would be received. What we didn't know was that everyone would be at home getting drunk. So, enjoying whiskey in moderation.
Pouring and sipping whiskey.
So after a few batches, we decided to do away with the batch date, and we just had that. And then we realised that nobody could see if it's on a bar or something. AD didn't really mean. So we've now added Ardnamurchan along the top. You'll be glad to hear. And so our latest releases all have Ardnamurchan, and the next batch of this, which is coming out quite soon, will have Ardnamurchan clearly so that people can read it.
People say, and they don't think the distillery is called AD. And Steve Coleman Williams here said, there's a lot of comments here. Steve Coleman Williams, wow, rarely do we get a whiskey with such a good range of notes. Usually they follow a general theme. And Richard Wingrove, nearly burnt brown sugar on the nose, real Bòcan nose, smoky peat to start, then a bit of vanilla, quickly overtaken by citrus fruit. Yanis is saying, this is why Pour and Sip is great. It gives you these unusual gems to try that we never would have found otherwise. Palate is very complex for Highland whiskey. They are usually quite monodimensional. And Steve Coleman Williams is asking, I've asked this question before, but as a green distillery or a distillery that is aiming to be, place importance in green philosophies, how do they juggle using peat, a fossil fuel by definition?
Well, two things. We did actually we haven't made a malting floor. We haven't used it yet, just because you need to employ a whole other person, very specialist. So at the moment we have it done for us by Baird's and Crisps, which are the two places in Scotland who deal with all the malting. Actually, you needed a tiny amount of peat for a whole year. Probably, a handbag full of peat is enough.
Sure.
So obviously everyone jumps on the peat bandwagon, but it's not nearly as much and just as destructive as people think.
Okay.
That's all I can say. But obviously we're using up a very, very ancient fuel, which will only be replaced very, very slowly. But it's not. I don't think it's going to be decimated.
Sure. Steve Conn Williams, massively fruity spice kick and with the wood and smoke pushing through to a finish, simply wonderful. Real Boinga tastes lemony smoke with honey and salt with a lemon smoke toasted almond finish. We were talking about those lemon notes before. You were mentioning, Antonia, Carl Willock struggling to isolate any one flavour with this dram bar. The peaty aftertaste, definitely a complex whiskey. Peterborough smoke dominates the taste in a pleasant way with dark chocolate waves and apple pie. Malcolm Tucker, palate, plenty of smoke and spice heat with apple coming through, more sea salt, hint of lemon on the finish. That maritime note is definitely coming through. That's from my personal opinion as well. Ali C, lemon zested creme patisserie. Wow, that's making me hungry. Peat smoke and a whack of smoked Malden salt.
Ooh, I love Malden salt.
Okay.
I'm just having some now. It's almost evaporated. It's so hot in here.
That's Malcolm Tucker. I have to admit, I previously tasted this dram in Plockton Hotel Bar.
Oh, Plockton.
Okay, where's that?
Midgest place on earth.
Okay, there you go. Stuart Pilling, enjoying the dram, but some of their car strength offerings are exceptional, and one won my vote for dram of the show at the Stoke Whisky Festival. Wasn't keen on the Ardnamurchan.
Oh.
What was
yes,
that?
that's another story. So we were looking for a cask for a customer who wanted to do a private bottling, and we opened a cask. And sometimes what happens is a cask, while it's being filled, can get a little water in it. That's usually how it happens, and it becomes a bit fusty, for want of a better expression, and it smells of gherkins. There's no other, and sort of cheese, and I mean the tasting notes were amazing, absolutely amazing. People just let rip. There was, very rude ones. I don't want to embarrass your audience. But in fact, we decided to bottle it because actually after the nose, which was interesting, the taste was actually really quite good. So we bottled it and called it Ardnamurchan, and we had the little Adelphi dancing man with a gherkin on a fork dancing.
I'd like to try. Can you buy this bottle?
I think it's all gone now. People keep popping up with bottles at tastings saying, "Can we try this?"
Sounds weird, which sounds like
it's quite weird. I think it's one, I'm not sure if I'd have a dram every night, but it certainly was very enjoyable and quite fun.
And Chris Leno is saying he's so good this dram, he's just bought a bottle. So this is the AD. What does the future hold for?
Well, as we're starting slowly, so we don't want to sort of bomb everyone with the releases. Last year we'd had the cask strength, which your one person just mentioned, was a peated cask strength, more bourbony than this, just with a few sherry casks, and that was so cask strength. It was about 58.2, I think, and that was, although it was quite strong, it was incredibly balanced and had a lovely kind of overlying sweetness to sort of balance the kind of tweediness. It was kind of rough but smooth at the same time. It was really one of my favourites that we've done. I had a week of watching Wet Wimbledon, and we polished a whole case off with some friends. Embarrassing. So we did that. We did a Madeira release last year, which was so we put some bourbon unpeated Ardnamurchan into some Madeira barrique for 15 months, and that was just like toasty Madeira cake in a glass. It was sort of salty. It's had the saltiness from the distillery and from Madeira sort of mixed up, and then this kind of rather cherry sweetness, which was it was lovely. It was a light sort of young drink, and it did really well. And what else? Oh, and every year we do a Paul Lenoir, which is we get 10 barrique from a lovely couple who have a small champagne house. And they sent us 10 barrique, and they're very experimental themselves. So they do different toastings for each of their casks, and they invite their customers to choose their toastings, and then they choose the age they want and everything. So it's basically like Build-A-Bear in the champagne world.
Sure. Okay.
So we get the casks where we put, again, for about 15 months, sometimes longer, bourbon, no peated, just unpeated bourbon cask, and each year it's different, and for the last 2 years they've come over and helped us do the blending. So the blending for all, we don't do production, but the 5 of us in the sales team, there's a kind of core who do all the blending. So we have a kind of collective memory, and at the end when we do this one, we give ourselves a blind tasting of some other ones just to make sure, and we always get it wrong. Okay. So we know we've done something right.
Okay.
So we've done the third Paul Lenoir, has been released, I think it's last month, well, a few weeks ago anyway. And what else have we got on there's lots of things in the pipeline, like a rum release maybe, and maybe another cask strength quite soon, and maybe for autumn. Yeah, well, the nice thing about being a small independent company is that you can be a bit experimental and just do things if you feel like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Ardnamurchan.
Yeah, the Ardnamurchan was an example.
Yeah, but I think it's the plan really as well to like really focus on the AD and just really get it out there, get it into as many, and really focus on the core range. A few more notes that are coming through. Steve Williams didn't realise it was so little, to be honest, in reference to the peat makes more sense. Don't get me wrong, I love peat, but I don't want to see it off the shelves. Just curious. Ian Turner hit of smoke on the palate, very licorice finish. This Pexman is up buying a bottle as well. Grew on me. Lots going on with this one. Quite a surprise, as many have said already. And Anthony Mullins has said he thought it was just the sun that was evaporating his drams. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Antonia. I've got another couple of drams that I need to get through, but if you want to stay to the end, please do. I'll be another 5 minutes talking through these, but it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for trying our whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end, I'm going to ask everyone what their favourite was of the night. So you'll know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Right. Absolutely amazing stuff. There's been 3 incredible whiskies so far tonight, I have to say. But we do have 2 others to try as well, and I am aware of the time. So I did want to just do a very quick run through of these shoes. So the first is the Bòcan, which we have tried Bòcan maybe twice before on Pour and Sip, and it's a lightly peated single malt from the Tomatin Distillery, which was introduced back in 2013. Not the Tomatin Distillery, the Bòcan was introduced in 2013. And Tomatin distilled this peated barley for a week of the year in the winter. So this stuff is pretty limited. And this is the new 12-year expression, and it was finished in a mix of rum casks from Guyana and Barbados, which is pretty cool. And I tried it earlier. I'm not going to try it now, but I did try it earlier. And there's lots of tropical barbecue notes, fresh notes of brine, grilled pineapple on the barbecue. Imagine grilled pineapple going straight on that barbecue, and milk chocolate on the palate. I have to say, I've liked everything that I've tried from Bòcan before. And we've had Scott Adamson with us talk about it before, and it's a really, really good dram. And this one in particular is great. I have to say, it's a really good summer dram for the evening, sitting by a bonfire, but particularly of a, at night time sitting outside, and you want something a little bit tropical, but you still want that Scottish peat in there as well. So that's what that is about. And it's really good. The next dram is the Old Perth 12. We've had Neil on before from Morrison Scotch Distillers to talk to us about Old Perth. I love Old Perth. It's a great blended whiskey, I have to say. But this is their 12-year-old. It's the part of the aged collection of the Old Perth, which is a brand that Morrison Scotch Distillers re-released back in 2014 as a blended malt. And since its revival, it's been mainly focusing on sherry cask maturation. And I've got to say, this 12-year-old is as good as you're going to try a blended whiskey, in my personal opinion. It's non-chill filtered, natural colour, bottled at 46%. Lovely stuff, an absolute sherry bomb. Notes of fruit, nut and chocolate, warm baking spices, dark jammy berries. It's an absolute showcase for, blending in general, but particularly sherry. And it's an absolute sherry bomb. And I love it. Now, I think that's enough about those 2. Like I always say, we're kind of trying 5 drams together, but I think, 3 in a row, that's good. If you want to try these ones now, please do tonight. If you want to save them for tomorrow, please do as well. So usually at this point, I'm going to invite, I might invite our guests that have stayed behind back on if they are still around, and we can have a little brief chat. I don't want to invite anyone. There we go. Alex has just suddenly appeared back. Hello, how's it going, man?
Good. Yes. How are you?
Yeah, all good, man. Thank you very much for sticking around with us. So we're gonna have a little quick chat, but
Sure.
As always on Pour and Sip, and I hate doing this, and it's not something I take pleasure in doing. Whiskey is subjective, but I do also think it's super fun. So please let me know so far what your favourite of this box has been out of the ones you've tried. Alex isn't going to be offended. I'm sure Antonia is not going to be offended. David's not going to be offended because he's gone. No one in Japan is going to be offended if you don't like Hakushu. So please do. Yeah, exactly. Steve Coleman Williams, well ahead of me. Big question time. Tonight's a hard one, I've got to say, because they've all been superb drams. I'm going to invite Antonia back onto the screen. Very brief gap there. Wait, sit back down. Yeah, we've got you. You went to get your roast beef, didn't you? There from the bathroom.
I did.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I got salad on my teeth.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it. No one's judging you here. It's a safe space. So yeah, please let us know your favourite, and I'll read them out at the end. Malcolm Tucker's already got the Bòcan in his basket. That was quick. So I always like to ask as well, because it's, you know, we always talk about our own brands and stuff like that. And but, you know, is there anything that's been particularly exciting that you've tried recently, Alex, that's really made you go, oh, wow, that's super exciting and different?
Oh, I'm trying to think if there was. I'm just looking at my whiskey shelf at the moment.
Your whiskey shop? Yeah.
No, my whiskey shelf. You can't see it out of the shop, but it's. I mean, you were saying before about the Klein Leash. I always love a Klein Leash. It's one of those whiskeys that I always go back to time and time again. So, but I've yet to try your delicious whiskey, so I might have to purchase a bottle myself and try it.
Of the Ardnamurchan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I really need to work on my.
Sounds perfect. Sounds perfect.
Thank you very much. I've got to say the Klein Leash 14 is just an absolute standard. As much as like the Glenfiddich 12 should be on everyone's bar, this one is one as well. If you're looking for that waxy, beautiful, oily whiskey, that is literally the absolute one. What about yourself, Antonia? Anything you've been trying that's not Ardnamurchan?
Well, some of my favourite whiskies are Springbank, and I was like 3 hours in Prague a few months ago, and I was taken to a bar where they had like a wall of Springbank. So it was like a dream. And I do remember having a bit of 30-year-old Springbank, and that was a real treat.
Delicious.
Oh, wow. Delicious stuff. I've got a very, on my shelf, it's that there. There's that row there is Campbelltown, but it's predominantly Springbank. That is one of my favourite.
Okay, where do you live?
One of my favourite shelves. You can come round one time, Antonia.
Do you live in Yorkshire?
Yeah, no, I don't. But yeah, no, I love, personally, I'm a huge fan of whiskies with this kind of very maritime quality, that kind of funk, especially that you get from something like a Springbank.
I mean, even things like if you're talking about like kind of maritime, kind of like Old Pulteney's, like a little bit of saltiness, not too much.
Yeah, that's a brand that I don't think we've had them on Pour and Sip as well. Honestly, we've had like, I mean, if you imagine we're doing 5 drams every month over the course of 2.5 years, we've had a lot of whiskey on here. So I do think it's actually crazy we've never had a Glenfiddich, unless I'm mistaken. But I've been doing it since the start.
I mean, I'm happy that we were able to join you and that we tried the Solera, because it's my go-to Glenfiddich. So that's why I'm really glad.
You choose that over the 18 or the 12 or the 21 is your go-to.
I mean, I think like for not every day, but like for a reaching off the shelf dram.
I do love that comment that everyone says in whiskey, by the way. It's a great everyday dram.
Yeah, I mean, like 12 for me. I always have a bottle of 12 in my freezer, and I'm sorry for whiskey purists on the call.
No,
I always have a bottle of 12 in my freezer because it makes a wonderful highball. So, bottle of 12 in the freezer, delicious, loads of ice, loads of soda water. One of the best drinks that you'll ever have. Now that summer's actually arrived in the UK, so that's good.
That's good.
18 is also a delicious one. Like I said, for me, 15 is just that kind of sweet spot of going. It's still got that kind of like Glenfiddich DNA, loads of richness, loads of vanilla, apples and pears, but it has that bit of complexity as well.
Is there anything you'd recommend to put it as if you were using it as a cocktail in a cocktail?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 15 for me is hands down a cocktail whiskey for mixability factor. But I would recommend, if you are on a call and you do enjoy cocktails, I would recommend the 15-year-old be used as something maybe kind of like a stirred down and up served cocktail as opposed to something served on ice. And if you are feeling a little bit more fancy, then the 18-year-old does make delicious old fashions and treacles and things like that. But that does kind of lend itself to more cocktails stirred and served over ice because it has a larger amount of sherry oak in it as well to back up that kind of dilution. So yeah, 15 for me it works on all different kinds of applications.
I've got to say the 12 in the freezer sounds like a great shot. I think some of our Pour and Sippers will take you up on that one. And then Is the AD it's something that you have you discussed cocktails mixing? Is that something?
Yeah, actually, my colleague Graham, who used to work at the Good Spirits Co in Glasgow, he's got some mates there who make brilliant cocktails, and they made us a really funny one. It's called Pina Colada.
Okay.
With Ardnamurchan at the end of it, and Pinot, and so it's got a little pineapple stamped and the yellow wax on top, and that's absolutely delicious. And I was thinking of other names. I don't know if anyone in the audience would like to suggest, but I thought of what was it? Oh, Mojito.
Mojito, okay.
Mojito.
We'll try that one.
That may not be so good.
I got to say, it's not my favourite of cocktails, a mojito, regardless, but with some Ardnamurchan in, maybe. I'm going to read out here all of everybody's favourites because there's loads coming through now, and everybody is now releasing theirs. I just need to get back to the start of this. Richard Wingrove, good variety of drams today. Malcolm Tucker, he's already got the cube Bòcan in his basket. Big question time. So, Chris Lennon, my favourite is the Ardnamurchan. Yanis, I tried 3 of the 5, probably the Ardnamurchan so far. Richard Wingrove, tricky choice this week. It is. What's your favourite? I'm joking. Anthony Mullins, just trying to preempt the dreaded question. My number 1 is Pour and Sip, which changed my mind about Glenfiddich, and now I have a bottle in my collection. Is that something you've ever had, Alex? Do you try and change people's mind? Maybe because Glenfiddich is something you find in the supermarket?
Yeah, I think that's what's really interesting, really unique about Glenfiddich as a brand is because people think that they know it.
Yeah.
And as an ambassador, I would consider myself to be like a modern day whiskey drinker. If I ever do kind of masterclasses or tastings, and people kind of associate Glenfiddich, and I say, "Do you enjoy Glenfiddich?" And sometimes they go, "No, not really." And I go, "Why? Which ones have you tried?" And they say the green one. And it's completely fair because it's identifiable everywhere. It's the green triangular bottle. It's synonymous with the whiskey world. It's in hotels, it's in bars, it's in restaurants, it's in off-trade and on-trade. It's globally everywhere. It's in over 180 countries. So people think that they've been drinking it for a long amount of time, when actually they haven't really, because, and if you didn't know this on the call, Glenfiddich 12 has only had the number 12 on it since the year 2000. So prior to that, we were a non-age statement to an over 8-year-old to a non-age statement during the 60s up until the kind of the early 2000s, and then we put the number 12 in the bottle in the year 2000. So the style of whiskey has changed quite dramatically at Glenfiddich. So it's always a lot of fun to kind of reassociate people with a brand that they think that they know, but they might have just kind of forgotten about a little bit, which is it's always really exciting for me as a brand ambassador. So.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's something you might a challenge you might face in general, but it's something in Pour and Sip. We've had so many people with, I don't like blended whiskey, for example, being a very, and on Pour and Sip, trying all these whiskies. We've had amazing blended whiskies from all over the world, and people just I didn't realise blended whiskey was really good, or I don't like peated whiskey, and suddenly people are like, actually, I do like peated whiskey, or I like this peated. I don't like bourbon. That's been another one we've had before. Carl Willock, Glenfiddich for me this month. Malcolm Tucker, tonight's favourite was the Ardnamurchan, but from the box, the cube Bòcan. Pexman, Ardnamurchan by a whisker. But geez, for me, there's not much in it, to be honest. Pour and Sip's making it harder each month. It absolutely is. Real boring. Ardnamurchan was my favourite this time, but Glenfiddich was a very close second. The Hakushu was very good too, but Ardnamurchan has the edge. Steve Coleman Williams, Pour and Sip regular. Ardnamurchan for me tonight, but Glenfiddich was a surprise. I expected an overly commercial whiskey. See, this is that note popped up again of expecting overly commercial whiskey, but it was superb by Walter. That's what I was saying about the 15 in general. It's one of those, again, just because you see it in the supermarket doesn't mean it's inherently bad.
No.
That's exactly what it is. I look at it as going, okay, this is like, I can get this in the supermarket, but this is a really good dram that I know that I can get easily, readily available.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not particularly expensive either. I will order one tomorrow down the pub as an apology. Greg Hewitt, Glenfiddich gets my vote, but like others said, I have now changed my mind about the distillery. Ian Turner, Hakushu for me, although the cube Bòcan after one sip is lovely. Clive Hampton, Ardnamurchan, Hakushu, Glenfiddich from the 3 we've tasted tonight. Stuart Pilling, Ardnamurchan, there's so many coming in here. Sorry, guys. Beats cube Bòcan by a whisker. I'm going to have to not read all out these. There's just so many. LEC, Ardnamurchan for me, followed by the cube Bòcan. Glenfiddich was a revelation, though. Hexman, the Q Bòcan is great. Is that the 15 the one you would give to someone who may be undecided, like maybe kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I think to kind of like strike that conversation of going, oh, I think I know Glenfiddich, and then you bring out a bottle of 15, you go, okay, let's have some fun and just kind of like see if you think you know Glenfiddich, or are you kind of like getting reintroduced to it. So yeah, I think for me, 15, I think that's why it's like a really unique product, and hence why we kind of put it on Pour and Sip tonight, just kind of like reignite that kind of love and the passion for Glenfiddich. So
I think it was a good choice. And Richard Wingrove, I was planning on saving the Q Bòcan for another time, but after seeing everyone talking about it, I may have to push the boat out tonight. Ali C, is that copper-coloured thing on Andy's mantelpiece a painting or a metalwork? Not sure if it's new or I've only just noticed it in nearly 3 years, but I'm liking it. Well, Ali C, that is a brand new painting. I've probably not seen it since the last one. I need to put it up though. So I'm going to phone somebody to do that because I am absolutely useless at DIY. And I don't even trust myself to put that painting up, but it is a painting. Thank you. Very well noticed. Thank you, Ali C. A couple more. Michelle Evans. So glad I was off work today to join you all live. Thoroughly enjoyed the 3 that I tried. Glenfiddich for me. Ali C. I associate Glenfiddich with my granny's drink cabinet, sat next to a bottle of Famous Grouse and Harvey's Bristol Cream. I'm reassessing my previous dismissal of it. There's nothing wrong with Harvey's Bristol Cream. And
sherry.
Right,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with cream. Malcolm Tucker, I have a Glenfiddich tasting set with 12, 15 and 18 in the cupboard that I should open. Yes, you should. Right, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next tasting session will be on September the... Do you know what? I'm not going to do this because I always do this and I don't actually know the date. So you'll get an email. But it will be in September. So thank you very much, as always, for joining us. Thank you so much to our guest, David, to you, Alex, to you, Antonia. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. And we will see you all soon. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.